Welcome to the Expand the Box Score draft preview with Matt Lownes. I'm here, Matt Lownes, with Kyle Suta. Kyle, tell us a little bit about your football background.
All right, so right now I'm the quality control coach on offense at Monmouth University. We're in the Big South. We just won the Big South champion last year, so we're in the upward rising program. And I work also with the quarterbacks, so that's probably my best position to evaluate. And just passionate guy about the NFL, just like you are.
Yeah, we're gonna just do a few little episodes here. It's the month of April. NFL draft's coming up on the April 23rd. It's gonna be a virtual NFL draft. All the staff will be at home, which means the head coach and GM will not be in the same room. Players will be at home. Roger Patel will be at home or the NFL league office. A little bit different this year. It's definitely going to cause some chaos before and after the draft. As today, even Steelers GM Kevin Colbert suggested maybe adding 3 more rounds to simplify the undrafted free agent period. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Kyle.
Wow, I mean, I don't even know. 3 rounds for undrafted free agents, that would be what, 90-something picks? That's a lot. I think Colbert complained before about the style of the draft. I mean, he needs to stop complaining.
I think I can understand why he may want this, but at the same time, I think the best part about undrafted free agency is that if you don't get drafted, you have the right to choose what team you want to go to if you have multiple offers. I know agents would push back against this heavily, as many 7th rounders don't even make a roster spot. So I can only imagine what it would be with 8th, 9th, and 10th round. But we'll see with that. We'll see if there's any major changes throughout our draft preview series this month. We will obviously let you know about that. Let's jump into a free agent recap before we get into a mock draft later on in the hour. Let's start with the AFC East and the New England Patriots. So obviously the New England Patriots are without Tom Brady for the first time in 20 years. What is this going to mean for the New England Patriots under center moving forward?
Well, right now they got 2 quarterbacks on the roster, Stidham and Hoyer. Obviously, Hoyer's going to be a backup. He knows the system. I think it's his 3rd tour with New England. But yeah, I mean, they like Stidham. I mean, we both know he had a great year, I think in 17 in Auburn.
Yeah.
18 wasn't as good, but, he possesses some good traits. I watched a little film with him like a few weeks ago from the preseason. He's got some traits. If it wasn't for that bad season at Auburn, a lot of people think he could have been a 1st-round pick in last year. So he has some traits, but again, he was a 4th-round pick for a reason. And, it's going to be a big learning curve for New England. And, Josh McDaniels, I mean, I've said it to you before, I think he's the best offensive line quarterback coach there is in the NFL. So if anyone's going to get him to play, it's going to be him, but it's going to be hard to expect him to come in and play well.
I mean, let's be honest here. The New England Patriots, no one truly knows what's going on with them moving forward. Unfortunately, they have a lot of dead cap situation, over $24.5 million, just alone on Tom Brady and Antonio Brown, who only played 1 game for the New England Patriots in his tenure there. But they did add some guys. They kept most of their guys, or most of their free agent signings were guys they brought back. Devin McCourty, the safety. They also added Adrian Phillips, the safety. Matthew Slater, special teams guy, coming back. He's a captain for them. A lot of money for a special teams guy, $2.375 million guaranteed. Joe Thuney, they franchise tagged. You obviously would agree that was a must keep if Brady was going to move on. And then, of course, they added Danny Vitale, or they kept Danny Vitale, the fullback. What do you think about the Patriots' moves? Anything specific other than Brian Hoyer, maybe?
Well, I mean, basically I think they traded Harmon, but all their free agents went to either the Dolphins or the Lions. No surprise there. The thing is, like you said before, they have no cap space, so they couldn't really be aggressive. But, Jamie Collins, he's a replaceable player. Look for them maybe to target a linebacker with their 1st-round pick to replace him. Van Noy, he's just an edge-setting type of linebacker. He doesn't offer that much as a pass rusher. They use him mostly on stunts. That's how he gets home to the quarterback. So he was replaceable. They weren't going to pay him that money. On the D-line, they lost Shelton. They replaced him with Bo Allen, who's just a cheaper version of Danny Shelton. And then in the secondary, they re-sign their guys, and that's why this defense is going to be so great. Because they have four legit starting corners. They have two really good safeties, but they also signed Adrian Phillips, who's a pretty good player, very versatile player. But the thing with New England is in 2018, they shifted their whole scheme. They became very aggressive because ever since Stephon Gilmore became the next Darrelle Revis, they were able to do that. And you look at Miami. I was watching some of their film, and they kind of do the same thing. They're very aggressive on third down. New England used to be able to just rush three or rush four. Now they're rushing 6 and 7. You saw when they faced Sam Darnold in the Monday night game, they just came after him every snap, and they could because if their corners are so good that if you're receivers, if you don't have more than one guy that could get open consistently, they're just going to blitz the hell out of you, and they're going to win because they have superior talent in the secondary. So it's just kind of a transition time for New England, and maybe the biggest loss is Dante Scarnecchia retiring, and I think that's why they re-signed Tooney. And I think Tooney was so important. And Bill doesn't want to pay him $16 million a year. That's a lot, especially for a cap-strapped team. But he did because Jarrett Stidham needs to be able to step up in the pocket, and having left guard to center, having Tooney, Andrews, and Mason is going to be huge for Stidham. So I think New England, they're in a transition, and it was very peculiar that they didn't add a tight end, but I don't know. I think Bill's just kind of waiting it out, and he knows this year's might be a transition for him, but I think they could definitely still compete with that defense.
All comes down to non-conference games. I think the last 20 years, Patriots have pretty much been guaranteed winning the AFC East. Next year, the schedule for the AFC East is extremely difficult. A lot of traveling. They have to play the NFC West. So we'll see when the schedule comes out later on in May. I think it's May 9th is the latest that'll come out. We'll see what the schedule looks like for the New England Patriots in their first year without Tom Brady. Moving down south to where I'm near right now, I'm in Vero Beach, Florida right now. The Miami Dolphins, they had a heck of a free agency. I mean, as we all expected, as they had tons and tons of cap space. I think they had over 90 million at the beginning of free agency. They signed Adrian Colbert, safety, Eric Flowers, offensive tackle. He's going to move to guard, it sounds like, for the Miami Dolphins. Camu Gruger Hill, the uh, more of a run tackling linebacker from the Saints. Jordan Howard, running back from the Eagles. Byron Jones was their biggest signing, 5-year, $82 million, $54.5 million guaranteed. He's not as good as Gilmore, but it was his turn to get paid. And then Ted Karras, a fringe starting offensive lineman. Shaq Lawson, another big signing, edge rusher. Manuel Ugba, edge rusher. Landon Roberts, linebacker. Kyle Van Noy, linebacker. So you see a theme here. They're building through the defense, and they're going to draft through the offense, is at least what we expect. So obviously, from a defensive standpoint, did the Dolphins get better?
Yeah, they basically filled every need on defense. I think, Brian Flores, he needs to give some juice to that pass rush. I mean, the guys that they had rushing the passer last year were mostly just undrafted guys that really couldn't get anywhere near the quarterback. So I think Agba has potential. He's flashed some upside. He was a pretty high draft pick a few years ago with the Browns. But yeah, Van Noy, and also he's building a culture there. And, Van Noy is one of the biggest culture leaders in New England, especially the last few years. So we had to bring him. And Van Noy loves Brian Flores. I actually personally met Brian Flores, Coach Flores. He's a great guy, and he's really building something in Miami. And I listened to some of the free agents. They were talking about how those 5 wins meant something to them. Obviously, it meant something to the Dolphins that were a part of it. But that was a big selling point for them. They're a young team. They're an ascending team, and Byron Jones was an amazing free agent signing. I mean, this guy is a top press man corner, which is essential in a Brian Flores scheme. And Xavier Howard should return from injury too, so that'll be a big boost. So they're building the defense in his image. Again, that type of defense, they don't invest in edge rushers. They don't invest heavily in them. So, Lawson and Ogba were mildly priced guys that could get after the quarterback. And like you said on offense, I mean, the offensive side, it's going to be stacked with their 3 first-round picks. So they have a lot of options at tackle, even receiver if they wanted to. Obviously, quarterback, they're going to address that. So I like the way it's going. And also, Mike Gesicki, Penn State guy, he did a great job last year. Devontae Parker, he smoked Stephon Gilmore. He had his worst game of the year, week 17. So they have some pieces on offense. It's just they got to get the quarterback right.
Both those guys really turned around the last second half of last year, the last 8 games of the season. Gesicki really showed that he's going to be in this league for a while, and he's going to be an offensive playmaker, especially in the red zone. And Devontae Parker totally played better than anyone expected last year. specifically with what they were working with on the offensive line and quarterbacks. The fact that they were able to make as many successful plays as they could was it really shows that Miami bought it that second half of the season, like you mentioned. And we'll move on to the New York Jets now. Yes, they're my favorite team. Uh, we learned quickly that the Jets are not going to be the Jets of old. They're not going to spend big in free agency. They're not going to go after the top guys, which to me is actually a little nice for once. We're not going to try to win the offseason just to do nothing in the regular season. We'll go over some of the names here. Josh Andrews, a backup offensive line, more of a developmental guy, but he's a guy they brought over from Eagles, in which GM Joe Douglas, first time GM for the Jets, had a chance to have when he was with the Eagles. Pierre Desir, the cornerback from the Indianapolis Colts. George Fant was their biggest signing, $27.3 million, 3 years, max value of $30 million. He'll probably be slated at right tackle as of right now. Jordan Jenkins, they re-signed, who originally Jet fans didn't think would come back. Alec Lewis is coming back with the Jets from the Ravens, in which he came over via trade in the beginning of the spring training preseason last year. Connor McGovern, center from the Broncos, will be the new Jets center or guard. We're not 100% sure yet. Patrick Onwuasor, I definitely didn't say that right.
I
Linebacker
think
from
it's a
the
Wazoo.
Ravens.
That's just been watching the Ravens these years, but
Yeah, a lot of look. The trend here is they kept some guys. They took some guys who Joe Douglas has familiarity with, being Alec Lewis, Onwuasor, and Rashad Perryman. 1 year, $8 million. Another trend for the Jets. Everyone was signed to a 1 year deal or a 3 year deal. That is basically a 1 year deal. Joe Douglas wants to reset his roster next year if he has to. Brian Poole, Greg Van Roten are the final signings. My perspective, they added a lot of guys that can start, can be productive, not expected to be with the Jets too long. Joe Douglas clearly has a long term plan in place, starting with this year's free agency and draft. And that's why you see all these 1 year deals. They didn't want to sign Robbie Anderson to a 4 year deal like he got with the Carolina Panthers. So they gave a bunch of guys a 1 year deal. They can always reset it next year and figure it out down the line. What do you think about the Jets free agency?
yeah, I like what Joe Douglas did. I think you look at the Bills, what they did last year with their offensive line. They took a lot of 1 year flyers, and it worked out for them. So, they didn't have a lot of money. Well, they did have money to spend. They just chose not to spend it. But it's smart because they've struck out so much in free agency over the last few years with Mike McCagnon. So I think it was a good job by them. They added some nice value free agents: Pierre Desir, a starting corner. They added George Fant, who athletically is really solid. It's just, can he put it together? I really like their O-line coach, too, Frank Pollock. He was with Dallas when they were really good over the last few years. So they have some good coaches on the staff. And, I just think they need to do a better job in the draft of surrounding Darnold because, like we've talked about it, I mean, the window, it's already year 3. So I know they're just building. Joe Douglas just got there, but, they got to capitalize on Sam Darnold while he's not making much money.
Yeah, this is definitely the make or break year for Sam Darnold. I mean, obviously, I think he will be with the Jets long term. I think he will end up signing an extension with the Jets long term. It's just a matter of his ceiling. I mean, we've seen his floor. We've seen him play really good too. There's 3 or 4 games from his first 2 years that he shows he can be a very good quarterback. But like you said, it all depends on what Joe D does in the draft and free agency in the next few seasons. Obviously, the sooner the better. And we'll move on to the Bills now. We're trying to keep it pretty short, division to division, trying to keep this under an hour and a half. And before we get into the free agent signings by the Bills, we obviously have to talk about arguably the second biggest trade of free agency. The Vikings traded wide receiver Stephon Diggs and a 2027 round pick to the Bills for a 2021st, 5th, 6th, and a 2021 4th. What does this mean for Josh Allen and that Bills offense adding Stephon Diggs?
Well, Josh Allen, he's a see it, throw it quarterback. He doesn't throw in anticipation. And the Bills' offense is very well coordinated by Brian Dable, former Patriot tight end coach, and Alabama as well. He worked there. They didn't have enough weapons last year, plain and simple. I mean, they played with the Patriots, they played with the Ravens to the end, they played with the best teams, but they just didn't have guys on the outside that could make enough plays. When the Ravens played them, they just played press man, they blitzed them, and they couldn't do anything about it because John Brown actually had a very good year last year. It's just he's not a number one receiver, and now with Stephon Diggs, they have someone that could help Allen even further. But the problem with Diggs is that he was very unhappy in Minnesota with Kirk Cousins, but I mean, in my opinion, there's no content. Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Josh Allen. There's no question. So I don't know. The grass isn't always greener on the other side, and I think Diggs might find that out. So it's really, like I said with the Bills, we could debate every signing, but it just comes down to how much can Josh Allen improve. That's really what it comes down to.
And I'll say, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't love this trade by the Bills.
They overpaid, really.
Forget what they gave up. I'm not worried about what they gave up. I think what they gave up is exactly what Stephon Diggs would cost on an open market. So I have no issue with that. You have to wonder though, can Diggs succeed in cold weather towards the end of the season? Diggs is known for having naggy injuries, whether it's a hamstring or a calf or something. And that's in a dome in Minnesota. Yes, he had to play in Green Bay. Yes, he had to play in Chicago, but he also got to play inside in Detroit in the division. So it does make me wonder, in a snow game in December for a playoff spot on the line or a division on the line, can Stephon Diggs succeed? I don't know. We saw Sammy Watkins struggle in Buffalo in the snow, in the cold weather. He ended up moving on to Kansas City later on. So I think that's a worry for me. And the fact that they added another small receiver bothers me. They had a bunch of small receivers last year. John Brown was their leading receiver. Cole Beasley. Yeah, Zay Jones, he's not there anymore. So we'll see, but I'm not in love with this trade. I'm really not. Let's go over their free agents quickly. Mario Addison. The theme here for the Bills is adding former Panthers, adding guys that Sean McDermott is comfortable with. Mario Addison, Vernon Butler, defensive tackle. Obviously, they got Stephon Diggs. They got EJ Gaines, the cornerback, Quentin Jefferson, defensive end, Josh Norman, former Panther, Quentin Spain, offensive guard, and Darrell Williams, former Panther. So will this work for the Bills? Can they win the division for the first time in so long?
Well, I mean, they have the best roster right now on paper, but it's going to come down to Josh Allen again, and they do actually have a lot of former Panthers. Just looking at their depth chart, but on defense, they're a very good defense. I mean, Tre'Davious White is maybe the most underrated corner in the league. Poyer and Hyde make a great safety tandem, and I really like adding Addison because they added Trent Murphy last offseason. He didn't really give them anything from a pass rushing perspective. So, basically replacing Shaq Lawson with Addison really improves their team. I think Addison's had 3 straight years with 10 sacks, so
Yeah.
he could definitely get after the quarterback. They have, like I said, they have a good roster. What Brandon Beane's done so well is he's built the foundation of the roster. They drafted Tremaine Edmonds, who's become a great player. Tre'Davious White, those were 2 first-round picks. Obviously, Allen was another first-round pick. And then he did a great job, like I said before, of building the offensive line and getting some guys that could play on the offensive line, like Mitch Morse. They drafted Cody Ford last year, and Devin Singletary showed some flashes down the stretch. So it's just really a matter of Josh Allen against Bill Belichick twice a year.
All right, let's move on to the Baltimore Ravens. They added a bunch of guys. Calais Campbell, they received in a trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars in exchange for a 2020 fifth-round pick, and they re-signed him to a 2-year, $27 million deal with $20 million guaranteed. They kept Matt Judon on the franchise tag, which was a big deal because most people were expecting him to hit the open market. They put a first-round tender on Matt Skura, and he's going to end up returning to Baltimore Ravens. Jimmy Smith, they re-signed cornerback, G.I. Ward, defensive end, and Derek Wolfe was their bigger defensive line signing. Mostly depth pieces for them, except for Wolfe and Campbell. But I think the biggest question for this team isn't really free agency or the draft. It's how do they get past that next step, actually getting to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, they did some good things, and that's what the Ravens always do in the offseason. They trade for veterans. They get them at a low cost. I mean, they got Calais Campbell, who's still a great player, for basically nothing. Derek Wolfe, I think they signed him for like 1 year, $4 million, so that's a really good bargain there. But this is a team as good as they are. They're basically a shoe-in to win the North. They have major holes. Yonda retired at right guard. They like Ben Powers, who they drafted in the fourth round last year. Scorer is coming off. I think he tore his MCL, PCL, and ACL last year, so he's coming off a major injury. And this isn't exactly the best offseason to recover from injuries because of what's going on. So they're very thin on the interior of their offensive line. They still need more weapons, obviously, at receiver for Lamar Jackson, as Lamar takes the next step as a more of a pocket passer. And then on defense, they're basically the cupboard is bare at inside linebacker. They didn't re-sign Josh Bynes. Owasu went to the Jets, so they don't have any starting player right there, and they definitely need more juice in their pass rush because they basically had an all-out blitz on third downs because they couldn't get pressure rushing through four. So the Ravens have a lot of needs, and we'll see how they handle them in the draft. But they're still a very good team.
If you're an AFC team, you have to. I think you have to start to realize that moving forward over the next 10 years, you need to have a pass rush. You're not going to beat Patrick Mahomes without a pass rush. I think that's pretty clear. It's been proven already. You beat Pat Mahomes if you have a pass rush. If you can't get to him, he'll beat you. So I think moving forward over the next 5 seasons, you're going to see AFC teams go aggressive with the pass rush, especially in this division, because you got to be able to get to the quarterback in the modern NFL. And if you have to go against Pat Mahomes in the playoffs at any point, you got to get to him. It's like Tom Brady. You got to get to Tom Brady to at least frustrate him. You got to frustrate the best quarterbacks, and that's how it's been. Cincinnati Bengals added. They have the first overall pick. Everything's pointing towards Joe Burrow, as it should. They didn't do much in free agency because they never do. They're the Cincinnati Bengals. They franchise tagged AJ Green, wide receiver. Nobody has any idea whether or not he's going to be a Bengal. I don't expect a holdout, but I expect a resolution either before the draft or sometime beginning of July. I do expect AJ Green to either sign his tag and get traded or get traded and a new deal with said team. They added DJ Reader, which was a massive contract. They didn't have a ton of signings, but they had some big ones. Von Bell, 3 years, $18 million. He's a player who had a tough start to his career, but really turned it around as a safety. DJ Reader, defensive tackle, 4 year, $53 million, and Trey Waynes, 3 year, $42 million. I felt that was way too much money for Trey Waynes at his age and his regression, but look, the Bengals needed corners. They felt they only have so many draft picks, so they can only fill so many holes through the draft. Overall, what do you think about the Bengals free agency?
Well, they actually spent and bought free agents, which is something they never do. Like you said, Reader, Waynes. They got some pieces. They're just a team in transition. They can't really compete. I mean, you look at the whole North. I mean, all the rosters are better than theirs. But they're going to draft Burrow, and we'll see. I mean, Zach Taylor, the head coach, he's going to have to build that offense around Burrow. Taylor came from the Rams, so that offense probably isn't going to fit Burrow. So he's going to have to tailor it to Burrow, and we'll see where they go from there. But they should win a lot more games this year, I would say, because their roster was better than a 3-win team or however many games they won last year. Geno Atkins, they got some pieces, AJ Green, and
they were injured. They were heavily injured too.
Yes, they were.
They had some serious injuries.
Yeah, they're still in transition, so not really expecting that much from the Bengals in 2020.
Browns, very much like the Bills, they're going for it. They had a ton of signings. I mean, they wanted to shape their roster before the draft. Not many teams have the opportunity to do that, but just like the Bills, they have a quarterback on a rookie deal, so they do have some leeway. Andrew Billings from Cincinnati, he stays in the division. Adrian Claiborne, defensive end. So that's already 2 guys to the defensive line. They added Jack Conklin on what some considered a cheaper deal. It was 3 year, $42 million, $30 million guaranteed, but Conklin wanted to hit free agency at age 28, which is what he's going to do. So that's why it was a tad cheaper than what people thought. BJ Goodson, a reserve linebacker, can be a starter if needed. Austin Hooper, tight end from Atlanta, 4 years, $42 million. That was probably the biggest signing they had. They're going to keep Kareem Hunt, it looks like. Andy Janovich, fullback, they required for a 7th round pick from the Broncos. Look, people say fullbacks don't matter, but both fullbacks in the Super Bowl had a legitimate purpose in that game. One of them even scored a touchdown. So fullbacks have low key made a return in the NFL via Sean McVay, Andy Reid, and other offensive geniuses. Kevin Johnson, the cornerback, Carl Joseph, safety, and backup quarterback Case Keenum. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I was misreading the line. Andrew Sendejo, safety, they also signed. So really a lot of reserve guys, some starters, but their roster looks a lot better.
Yeah, and Kevin Stefanski, the new head coach, he's going to bring over the exact offense he ran in Minnesota. So a lot of outside zone running game and a lot of play action off that, which should fit. Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham getting them free releases on deep crossing routes and post routes, and but they really filled every need Stefanski needed to run his offense. They got him a fullback. They got him another pass catching tight end to go with David Njoku. You got two really good pass catching tight ends. You got Jack Conklin, who's a much better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. And that's why I think his market didn't develop as much, because a lot of teams look at this tackle draft and say, hey, I could get Jack Conklin. I don't have to pay $15 million a year for him. So, and like you said on defense, a lot of value signings, and that's to be expected. They're the most analytically ran football department in the NFL. A lot like Kevin Johnson, a lot of Carl Joseph, a lot of former first round picks. They think that maybe they could get a little more out of them. But I like where the Browns are going. It's just, and the offense that Stefanski runs is definitely fits Baker Mayfield, because Baker can't just stand in the shot. He can't just stand back there in the shotgun and consistently make plays because of his height. And, you have to compensate that by moving the pocket for him. So I think Stefanski will be a good fit for the Browns. And, we'll see what they got. I mean, Dorsey completely struck out on Freddie Kitchens, obviously. So, they're trying to reset for this year. And they do have talent. It's just about, how good of a head coach and a culture builder is Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, I mean, it's all going to come down to Stefanski. There's too many egos in that locker room as far as Baker, Odell, Jarvis Landry, Kareem Hunt, this, that. It just keeps, the names are coming. They have a ton of elite talent because they've had tons of first round picks the last decade, even the last 3 years. So I do think it comes down to the head coach. But if there's an offense you want to put him in, it's that one. You saw how successful Kirk Cousins can be with two elite wide receivers and a tight end. It's the exact same thing, and now they have two tight ends in David Njoku and Austin Hooper. So I expect some eccentric offense. I don't know what to expect from the defense. I need to see the draft first, but I think the offense will get better over the next season. We'll move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They didn't have a lot of cap room. Most of it was spent towards keeping their own guys. Bud Dupree, franchise tag, that's where most of the cap went. Derek Watt, they kept. Chris Wormley, defensive tackle, they actually, in an extremely rare trade with the Ravens, they got Chris Wormley. Stefan Wisniewski, former Penn Stater, heading back to Pennsylvania, 2-year deal. He will probably start that offense, but nothing's guaranteed with Wisniewski. He's been a borderline starter his entire career. And then Eric Ebron, 2-year, $12 million. It's a much better deal than what the Bears did with Jimmy Graham. So I personally think the Steelers did well with what little money they had. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think Eric Ebron he has some upside. Obviously, he had a big 2018 with Andrew Luck in Indianapolis. I got to give the Steelers a lot of credit. Last few years, they built this defense up. Obviously, TJ Watt's become a star. Devin Bush completely transformed their defense and made them a lot faster. And Minka Fitzpatrick I know they gave up a lot, but he was a big difference maker for them. So they have a very strong defense, and offensively, Big Ben hasn't really played in a year, so we'll see where he's at. But they definitely need to add another weapon for him, because Juju can't do it by himself. James Washington has kind of been a bust so far. Deontay Johnson has shown some strides here and there, but I like the Steelers roster. It really just depends of how much Big Ben has left in the tank, and if they can get him another weapon at receiver.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a team that absolutely needs to add a wide receiver in the draft, it's them. I mean, they have the tight ends, albeit maybe not the most athletic tight ends. They have a good running back. They could definitely use a second running back, but they also need. It wouldn't shock me if they had a running back and two wide receivers at some point during this draft. It just seems too necessary for an older quarterback. We'll move on to the AFC West and the defending Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs. Again, not much money for this team. They literally, before restructuring Watkins' deal, had less money than many people have in the bank right in this exact moment. Yes, even during a pandemic. I think they had $144 in cap space, which is just unheard of in modern NFL times. But they did add a few guys. Antonio Hamilton, a cornerback, Chad Henne, a quarterback, backup. They needed a backup quarterback. Chris Jones was where most of their money went on the franchise tag. I think he's getting somewhere around 17 or $18 million. But he's 100% worth it. They did re-sign Demarcus Robinson, which some may say wasn't necessary. I find it necessary, as a lot of their receivers have injury issues throughout the season. And then they brought back, they picked up the 2.3 million contract option for playoff hero running back Damian Williams. Are the Chiefs set up, as long as they have a average to above average draft, to win again?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, they were one of those teams that they could just sit on their hands and do nothing, and they'd be fine. Defensively, I don't really like where they are right now. They need more speed at linebacker. They need better corners. They lost Bashad Breeland, so they're definitely need to target that in the draft. And one thing that a few people have said that I trust is that the Chiefs are really trying to improve the interior of their offensive line because that was a big problem last year. So look for them to target that, especially at 32, maybe like a White Cushenberry, Cesar Ruiz, one of those interior guys. But yeah, I mean, this is a great team. They're probably going to be the favorites again to repeat. But they definitely have some guys that they're going to need to pay, like Chris Jones and some other guys too. So they're just have to these type of teams like the Saints and Chiefs, they have to draft for depth in this draft because they don't have clear needs. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the draft.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if Cesar Ruiz ends up there. I keep hearing first round talent, first round talent. Obviously, some people may have 40 first round talents and there's only 32 spots. So some guys will fall. But if there's one team that makes a lot of sense for one prospect, Cesar Ruiz, in my opinion, everything I'm hearing from and everything I'm reading says he is the interior offensive line guy if you need one. And obviously, we'll get to that over the next month, going over specifics and really digging into some prospects. Las Vegas Raiders feels weird to say, but they're the second biggest sports team behind the Las Vegas Knights. It's a very good thing for Vegas, I think. A lot of people don't understand there's a greater Las Vegas with hundreds of thousands of people who live and grow up there. A lot of baseball stars, including Bryce Harper, grew up there. So it is a emerging city and an emerging sports city. It'll be fun to see how it works out long term in Vegas. But let's talk football, obviously. Nelson Aguilar, the guy who can't catch, according to Philadelphia, wide receiver coming over to them. They desperately needed to add someone. They ended up with Aguilar. Malik Collins, defensive tackle, sneaky good move for them. Jeff Heath, another former Dallas Cowboys safety, going to the Raiders, 1 year deal, 2 year deal. Sorry. Eric Kush, offensive lineman, interior offensive line guy. Nick Kwiatkowski, and just such a necessary move, an inside linebacker for the Vegas Raiders. And they also added Corey Littleton. They added two for a ton of money. Marcus Mariota will be the backup. May or may not compete with Carr in training camp. We don't know yet. And then Carl Nassib, defensive end. Damaris Randall, defensive back. And then, oddly enough, they brought in Jason Witten on a 1 year deal, which I don't know. We don't have to talk about that. But one thing I noticed is they've spent a lot on draft capital the last 2 years in the defensive line. But then they go ahead and add Carl Nassib and Malik Collins. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, but it seems a little unnecessary.
Yeah, they're really drafting for depth, especially at safety too. I mean, they added Demarius Randall and Jeff Heath. They already had two starters, Jonathan Abram, they drafted in the first round last year, and Joyner, who they paid a lot of money or paying a lot of money. On defense, they're getting better. I mean, when John got there, I mean, it was really bad on defense, and Farrell didn't really do a great job rushing the passer. I mean, that was one of the what were they doing picks of last year. I just can't see him as the fourth pick in the draft, but Mayock made a lot of draft moves aimed at improving the culture, guys, good, high character guys. Ironically enough, Max Crosby was their best pass rusher last year, who they drafted in the fourth
He's a
round.
fun he's a fun guy to watch.
Oh yeah, Monmouth played against him 2 years ago. Great player from Eastern Michigan. But yeah, Littleton, Kwiatkowski, great moves. Littleton is one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. There's no doubt about that. So they're getting more talent on defense, and I took the opportunity to watch some of John Gruden's offense from last year, and I was surprised. He did a great job. He did a great job scheming plays for Darren Waller, who's one of the best stories in the
Yes.
NFL. How he came back from some drug problems, and now he's a star. He always had talent with the Ravens. I mean, he's 6'6", 255. He could run a 4.5. I mean, he's an extremely talented player. Josh Jacobs was a great player last year, and he also schemed a lot of good plays for Tyrell Williams, who is the big, talented, fast wideout that they paid a lot of money for. So I think if the Raiders could get a Jerry Jeudy, a Henry Ruggs in the draft, I think this offense could take off because they're going to need to score points. Their defense is good, but not good enough to really hold the Chiefs on probably under 30 points. So, they're going to need to take off. And Carr, he's really a point guard. He's a ball distributor for Gruden. He's not going to make great flashy plays, but he's very accurate. He has a completion percentage near 70 the last 2 years ever since Gruden got there. It's a good fit. I know they brought in Mariota. I think it's more for insurance, but obviously if John got sick of Carr or something happened, he would have no problem turning to Mariota, who he loved. So I think the Raiders are on the rise, and I really like what Mayock and Gruden are doing. And a lot of people wrote Gruden off. Maybe we did when he got hired, but he's showing that he could really coach, or he could still coach.
I just don't believe in Derek Carr. I see him as a bit like a better version of John Kitna. Growing up, John Kitna, look, he could get the job done. He can run a little bit, just like Carr can. Carr had some pretty good moves with his feet last year, but the accuracy is always a question. The deep accuracy is always a question, and the decision making is always a question. Can he get the job done? Yes. Could he win a Super Bowl? Yes. Is he an elite quarterback? No. So it's a question of how well John Gruden can work with what he has.
What's
That's
interesting about the Raiders, real quick, is John Gruden had a great opportunity this offseason to move on from Derek Carr, and he didn't. And I think that speaks volumes.
says a lot. It says a lot. Clearly, they think he's the guy. Look, some teams buy in. Baltimore, it took years to get rid of Flacco. They bought in. He won a Super Bowl. They gave him the contract. They ended up trading back in just to get Lamar Jackson. Nobody ever thought Lamar Jackson would get to where he did as quick as he did, and he did. So they traded Flacco, but it took a long time. We'll see if Mariota ends up playing and/or starting, but we know how crazy John Gruden is. You could see both quarterbacks on the field in a special package next year. Just saying. Football's changing a lot. Los Angeles Chargers, they are officially moving to LA. And if there is capability via the pandemic that we're in right now, the Chargers and the Rams, as announced today, will be the
Hard Knocks.
Yeah, thank you. Hard Knocks teams this year, the first ever two-team Hard Knocks. Something to think about, nothing to care about. Who knows if it'll even happen, but that is something that happened today. The Los Angeles Chargers, very peculiar position, finally walking away from Phillip Rivers, something the Steelers couldn't do with Big Ben and the Giants. Eli Manning retired. So as far as those three, they will always be the three guys from that draft. So we'll always think of those three together. The Chargers are moving on. They added a fantastic signing. Brian Bulaga, the offensive tackle from the Green Bay Packers. Austin Eckler, running back. They kept him, got rid of Melvin Gordon. We'll move on to Gordon and the Broncos after this. Chris Harris from the Broncos, they added. Hunter Henry, they franchise tagged. Linval Joseph, the defensive tackle from the Vikings, formerly of the Giants. And then Trey Turner, a former Panther, they acquired in a trade for left tackle Russell Okung. So tell me what you think about the Chargers, because from me, A-plus free agency. I think they made the right choice running back wise. They added the right offensive lineman. They kept Hunter Henry, who many thought would end up a New England Patriot, and they added Linval Joseph. For what they did, yes, they gave out a lot of money. I think they did great.
It's kind of hard to. I guess the direction that they're going, judging off of their free agency, is that they think they could win now. They're also moving to a new stadium, so they wanted to get big name players to attract some fans there. But if you really wanted to attract fans, you're really proceeding with Tyrod Taylor as your quarterback. I know Lynn loves him, but it just seems strange to me. I mean, if they're going to draft a quarterback at 5 or 6 or trade up, why are you signing Bulaga, who's 31, Chris Harris, who's declining, right? And even Linval Joseph, who's like 32 years old. So you're signing all these veteran free agents for what? So it's just kind of confusing to me, what their direction is. I mean, if they were going to do this, I mean, they should have just kept Philip Rivers. And Philip Rivers is probably laughing now. Now that he leaves, they trade for Trey Turner. They signed Brian Bulaga. I mean, he could have really used Brian Bulaga last year. And don't forget that in 2018, going into the playoffs, this team was looked at as a serious Super Bowl threat. They had a great team, a 12-win team.
Defense was absurd that year.
Absolutely. And they steamrolled the Ravens in Baltimore in the playoffs. So I just don't really know what the Chargers are doing. And, Tom Telesco's been there forever. I don't know. I really don't know. I just have mixed feelings about what their direction right now.
I'll guarantee this. There's no way Tyrod Taylor starts every single game. He's
no way.
barely ever done. I think he did it once in Buffalo. He's injury prone. I have no knock against Tyrod Taylor, the football player. My issue is injuries. I'm big on that. And they need to add. I don't know if they think Easton Stick is a legitimate backup, but I could totally see Jordan Love ending up to the Chargers.
I could see them signing Cam too, honestly. He's just a better version of Tyrod. More health concerns, but why not?
I think it makes sense in where we are right now. I think we don't know what they're going to do in the draft. They could end up trading up to get Tua. They could end up moving back. They could end up getting Herbert. We don't know. But as of right now, with the roster they have right now on April 7th, I agree 100%. Cam Newton makes sense for the Chargers. And who knows? Cam could totally revive his career. And they could have a reverse Drew Brees situation where they bring in a guy with injury history and he ends up restarting his career in LA when Brees went from San Diego to New Orleans. Yes, it's crazy. My mind thinks like that, but you never know. Moving on, finishing out the AFC. I think we did, yeah. Oh, no, we got to go into the AFC South. But Denver Broncos, the biggest move they made is arguably via trades. AJ Bouye, major signing 2 years ago with the Jacksonville Jaguars, top slot corner in the NFL at one point, in exchange for a 2024 round pick. Major. They needed that. Chris Harris, as we just talked about, ended up with the Chargers. So they got AJ Bouye. They then traded for Jarrell Casey, just one of the most underrated defensive linemen in the league since he entered the league with the Tennessee Titans, only for a 7th-round pick, which definitely infuriated Titans fans. Graham Glasnow, a major signing for them, 4-year, $44 million. A little too much money, probably, but we'll let you give your John Elway opinion in a second. Agree to terms with Melvin Gordon, 2-year deal, $16 million. He held out, did not work out for him. That was the first case where we saw a holdout running back just failed miserably for him. Shelby Harris, defensive tackle, came back. Sam Martin, 3-year deal. Look, punters do matter, not in the grand schemes, but they do matter if you watch football. And then Nick Vannett, a sneaky signing, 2-year deal. The former Charger and Steeler tight end ends up in Denver. What do you think about the Broncos? Because they think they can win now with Drew Lock. What do you think?
Yeah, well, they're clearly building Vic Fangio's defense up. I think it shows that he has some pull now in that building with Elway. Because the thing with Vic Fangio's scheme is, he plays a lot of too high coverages. He likes his defensive linemen to eat up space to keep those linebackers clean. And, he's obviously invested heavily in the D line with Jarrell Casey, bringing back Shelby Harris. And obviously, Bryce Callahan coming back is huge for them, too, because he's one of the best nickel corners in the game. And AJ Bouye on the outside, maybe declining a little bit from a few years ago, but he could definitely still play. So defensively, they're still great. I mean, Bradley Chubb missed the whole year last year. He'll be back. But offensively, very strange. I mean, Melvin Gordon, why would you pay him $8 million a year when you already have Philip Lindsay? Like, it just the Melvin Gordon signing make no sense to me. Offensive line, Garrett Bowles. I mean, he's just horrible, and he gets called for like 20 holding penalties every year. I mean, everyone knows it. Every defensive coordinator is attacking him with their rush plan, and what is John Elway going to do about it? I don't know. And if he thinks he can win now, he's really kidding himself because other than Cortland Sutton, I mean, what weapons does he have? And yeah, Drew Lock, he played well down the stretch last year, but I mean, a lot of people played well down the stretch. Geno Smith played great down the stretch in 2013 or so. You know, I don't know. It's just Denver's clearly the fourth best team in the division, and I don't. John Elway, he's just never going to get fired. He's always going to be there. So you just have to accept that.
Since he took over as GM, not including last year's draft, he's been the worst GM as far as drafting goes.
Yep.
I don't look. Take that how you want it. Take it with a grain of salt. But it's kind of last year he did do well. I'm not gonna lie. He had a sneaky good draft at times. He has done well with undrafted free agents and Philip Lindsay and a few other guys. But overall, it's a risk. When he's drafting the team, you got to be nervous. Let's move on to the AFC South. Tennessee Titans almost made it to the Super Bowl, made it to the AFC Championship game. Just couldn't figure out the Chiefs, as many other teams have struggled over the last season and other going even back with Alex Smith. The Chiefs were still a very good team and a tough team to beat. They added Vic Beasley 1 year, $9.5 million guaranteed. He never played up to his height after his first season as a rookie with the Falcons. They obviously franchise tagged Derrick Henry. He signed the tag, so he's staying. Dennis Kelly will become the new offensive right tackle with Jack Conklin going to the Cleveland Browns. Kamale Correa, I doubt I said that first name right. Edge rusher, speed rusher, signing for the 1 year deal with keep staying in Tennessee. Tyson Brio from the Falcons will be their swing tackle, and then obviously gave quarterback Ryan Tannehill a 4 year, $118 million deal, $62 million guaranteed. Is Ryan Tannehill the answer? Are they just going to run with Derrick Henry? Will this team get as far as they did last year? I think that's what people want to know.
Yeah, well, they kind of had no choice to franchise Tannehill re-sign Tannehill and franchise Henry with the success that they had. It's just a question of will they ever get beyond the championship game with that tandem. So, the biggest loss for Tennessee was Dean Pease, retired. Their great defensive coordinator. Obviously, Mike Vrabel's a great defensive mind too, but Dean is one of the best there ever was. So losing him is going to hurt. One low-key signing they made was Vic Beasley, and I really like that signing. They're just going to use him in pass rush packages, and he's still an explosive athlete. I mean, he's not going to be able to beat tackles one-on-one, but, Vrabel was famous in Houston for his diamond front, which is his 5 defensive linemen and linebackers. And the advantage of the diamond front is that it gets your pass rushers one-on-one, and then you can kind of manipulate protections with a lot of stunts and twists up front. So he's going to be able to do that with Landry and Beasley and Rashaan Evans, who's a very athletic linebacker. So look for Mike Vrabel to use a variety of different fronts and attack protections. And their defense is still going to be good. It's just a matter of their offense. And, they do have a good team, no doubt. They have some weapons, but, the South is going to be a 3-team race, and it's going to be very competitive. But, yeah, I would probably say they have the third best quarterback in the division for sure.
The first 24 hours of free agency, the Jacksonville Jaguars looked like they were rebuilding long term, traded away a bunch of guys. But then over the next 72 hours, they kind of added. And it makes you wonder, they think they could maybe win with Gardner Minshew. And they have, I think, a league high 13 draft picks. So they may think they can compete for the division right away with Gardner Minshew, as we all saw Minshew Mania, Minshew Madness last fall. But, they did add some guys that, to me, was a shock because I thought they were rebuilding at first. Tyler Eifert, 2-year deal. We'll see if he could stay healthy as a tight end, the former Bengal. He was very good his first few seasons in the league. Rodney Gunter, defensive lineman, Rashawn Melvin, cornerback, Yannick Ngakoue, they placed the franchise tag, but it is known that he will be traded before the tag.
He will never play for the Jaguars again.
Exactly. Well, maybe later on in his career, but not right now. Joe Schobert, massive deal. 5-year, $53.75 million. Inside linebacker from the Browns. Arguably overrated according to many, but we don't have to get into the specifics of that. Tyler Shatley, a reserve offensive lineman, and then Al Woods, defensive tackle from Buffalo. So like I said, at first it seemed like they were rebuilding, but then they go give this massive money to Joe Schobert. They give some money to Tyler Offord. They have a bunch of draft picks. What's going on with the Jaguars, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, they ran the team into the ground over the last 2 years with Tom Coughlin. It was just an epic failure there. And David Caldwell still sitting in that GM chair, which is unbelievable. Usually when a team tears down a championship, AFC championship caliber team, they replace the GM and coach. But Doug Marone and David Caldwell are still there, so Shad Khan must really have faith in these two. But yeah, there's really nothing to say about Jackson. I mean, they'll be competing for the first pick. I mean, the talent. It's amazing how fast the talent on defense deteriorated. It was one of the best in the league, even in 2018, the year after. But they just had a bunch of culture issues. Tom Coughlin, he was the executive VP, but he thought he was still the coach. There was rumors that he took Doug Marone's office and moved Marone to one of the coordinators' offices, which is unbelievable. Yeah, this is. I really have nothing really much to say about the Jaguars. I mean, they're just rebuilding right now.
And then, of course, there is the Indianapolis Colts, and then we'll finish up the AFC with the Houston Texans, who arguably had the most confusing free agency period in the NFL. Indianapolis Colts, massive trade that nobody saw coming. All the insiders were tweeting, "There's a trade that's going to happen. It's no one saw this coming." They get DeForest Buckner, arguably one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league, from the San Francisco 49ers, who made it to the Super Bowl, just didn't have the money to keep Buckner long term. In exchange for the Indianapolis 2020 first round pick, the 13th overall pick, the Colts gave Buckner an absurd extension worth $21 million per year. Not more than Aaron Donald, but more per year than Aaron Donald, I believe. He's definitely not as good as elite Aaron Donald, but we also saw Aaron Donald take a step back last year. Other than that, they kept Anthony Costanzo on a 2-year, $33 million deal. No one really knew if he would stay with the Colts, but he is going to stay with the Colts. LaRaven Clark re-signed with the Colts. In my opinion, if you have a team name in your first name or last name, you should have to be with that team. It's unfortunate that LaRaven Clark can't be a Raven, but to each their own. Xavier Rhodes, very washed up cornerback, and then Philip Rivers. So tell me what you think about the Colts, as obviously they've done a very great job drafting the last few years. Can they win, though?
I think they can. Philip Rivers, a lot of people are writing him off, but this is a
Me.
guy.
That's me. I'm writing
Yeah,
him
yeah,
off.
of course. You and about a million other people, but Rivers can still throw with elite anticipation. He has a PhD level of understanding defenses and coverages, and being able to process defenses as quickly as he does is still a huge asset. And he may not have the arm strength as he used to, but he can still play at a high level. Frank Reich knows this. He said he watched every single Philip Rivers snap over the last 2 years. And Frank Reich is one of the best offensive minds in the league. So if he has confidence in Rivers, he obviously knows Rivers. He was the OC in San Diego a few years ago. So I think it was a great move by them. And then the Buckner move was huge because, they think that with Rivers, and they only signed him to a 1-year deal, but I have a hard time believing that marriage is only going to last 1 year. They think that they could compete in the AFC. They think that they could win the division. And, to further their competition is to beat Kansas City. So that's why they got Buckner, because they need to push. They need people to crowd the paint against Mahomes. They need to get in his face. And interior rushers nowadays have become just as valuable as edge rushers. So Buckner was a huge move, a necessary move for them. Justin Houston played at a high level last year, so that's a good move for them. And in their scheme, Matt Eberflus they play a lot of zone coverage, so they need to get pressure with their front four. So I think Xavier Rhodes is even a good fit for them because they're not asking him to match up with opponents' best receivers. Clearly, he cannot do that anymore. So I think he's a good fit in Indy. And like I said, I love Rivers, but the one problem, and we'll get to this in our draft stuff, is that the skill positions that they have now is not a fit at all for Rivers. They don't have a pass catching tight end. They don't have a big receiver like Mike Williams, and they're going to need to address that in the draft.
Yeah, it's weird. There's a significant drop off in the wide receiver talent from about 5 or 6 to the rest. There's some very, very good receivers in this year and next year's draft, but there is a significant drop off in the talent from the top of the tier to the next tier, which is interesting because they don't have a first round pick. So we'll see what they're able to do throughout the draft. They're a team that's famous for trading picks for veterans. So we'll see if that happens before, during the draft. We'll see, but I think the way it stands right now, they can compete for the division, but I just don't see a Super Bowl winning team yet. I would like to see the draft first. Obviously, we're going to have a draft recap, and we'll go over major predictions after that. Moving last team in the AFC, Houston Texans. They started everything off with the trade of all trades, the biggest trade in NFL history as far as just shocking. I mean, yes, Randy Moss got traded. Yes, Terrell Owens got traded. There's been plenty of elite players that have been traded, but not during their prime. The last time a trade this big happened for a guy in his prime was Darrelle Revis, but he got traded for what most would say the right cost. So let's break this trade down. The Houston Texans acquired, this is technically the terms of the trade, acquired running back David Johnson in a trade with the Cardinals, along with a 2020 second round pick and a 2021 fourth round pick, in exchange for DeAndre Hopkins and a fourth round pick. Shocking. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, in my opinion, best catcher of the football. I know that isn't grammatically correct, but you understand what I'm talking about if you know football. He catches the football like no one else. Yes, Julio Jones and him are probably 1A, 1B, whatever way you want to put it. Odell's in there somewhere, a few other guys. Michael Thomas is in there. But I think we can both agree all these guys are in the same group, 1A, B, C, D, E. And to get what they got back, in my opinion, was ludicrous. It was egregious. You see scouts all over the league making fun of it, front office staffs making fun of it. Let me just read off the names, and then we could hear your opinion of it. I think the Cardinals clearly won that trade. They didn't have to get rid of a first-round pick. So let me go over these names, and then you could give me your opinion on their free agency as a whole. Randall Cobb, 3-year, $27 million deal. I had a viral tweet because of Cobb, so I'm honestly happy because of that. Kaimi Fairburn is going back to the Texans. They had kicking problems for years. No more, according to them, with Fairburn. Darren Fells, tight end, 2-year deal. He actually played really well for them, and it seems like he has a good connection with Watson. Philip Gaines, the cornerback. Vernon Hargraves, cornerback. They're going to take a risk on the former first-round pick. Timmy Jernigan, defensive tackle. I mentioned David Johnson. We don't know what he'll bring to the table. He has a high cap spot, though. AJ McCarron, backup quarterback. Eric Murray, safety, a very good young safety. Brent Cavale, former Jet backup tackle to the Texans. Bradley Roby, 3-year, $36 million from the Denver Broncos, the cornerback. And then finally, defensive back, Jalen Watkins. So what do you think about Hopkins? What do you think about the Texans free agency as a whole, what they did, and did they mess it up?
Yeah, I'm actually going to defend Bill O'Brien for a little bit here because Bill O'Brien's trying to build a culture, and it's a tough job. I mean, he has final say on personnel. He's the head coach and he's the offensive play caller, so he's got a lot on his plate. And I think from a coach's perspective and a culture building perspective, he knew that DeAndre Hopkins had to go because it just wasn't working out. He was bringing young receivers on the wrong side. They were in practice and stuff. He was trying to influence them in a negative way, is what I meant to say. So he knew he wanted to go, and he knew that he couldn't pay Hopkins long term. Hopkins is getting older, and in the NFL today, Hopkins wins contested catches. He wins by not being open. Those are most of his catches. So I think as he gets older, I mean, it's fair to say that he's probably going to be able to separate even less and less, and he never won with speed. So I think that, Bill O'Brien said, hey, he's damaging my culture, A, and B, his traits are only going to diminish, and he's not worth paying long-term, especially when he has to pay Deshaun Watson probably like $40 million. I mean, Jared Goff's making 35. I mean, Watson's probably saying, I'm getting as much as Mahomes. Defensively, I didn't like what they did. I think they're moving with Anthony Weaver, and once again Romeo Crennel for like the ninth fucking time. He's going to be a senior advisor, which I mean I don't know. If I were him, I mean he's like 75. I would just retire. I mean
There's
I don't know
so
why. Oh, I mean O'Brien's demoted him like 5 times, but whatever. But I think they need more corner. If they're going to run, because Anthony Weaver's influence is really Rex Ryan. I think he worked under Mike Pettin too. So they're going to need corners that can play man to man and also just match up in their matchup zone coverages. But they do have two really good safeties. We'll see if J.J. Watt can stay healthy. They definitely need more to their pass rush. And one little nugget on David Johnson. I mean, he really didn't have much juice last year, but one thing is he's a good pass catching running back still. He could still do that. And I think from a coach's standpoint, Bill O'Brien says, hey, let me take him and see if I could get him back to where he was. But I know a lot of people are criticizing him, but I think Bill O'Brien is trying to move this team to the next phase.
I think one of the bigger things that people forget about David Johnson and specifically bringing him to Houston is he's a very good pass blocker as a running back. And when you have an extra defender, whether it's a cornerback or a safety delayed blitz, when an offensive lineman will not have a chance to get him and he has an open blitz at the quarterback, you need a strong running back to, at the very least, give the quarterback half a second more, which is something David Johnson's very good at. We know for a fact Watson runs around like crazy. He extends plays. He's going to need a guy back there to help him with that. So I'll say this. In that aspect, I can understand why they would bring in David Johnson. The confusing part is not restructuring the contract. Maybe that happens down the line. But at the same time, I know how the league works. It would have happened by now. So I can see why Texans fans are pissed. I can see why people want Bill O'Brien fired. I can see why people think it was ludicrous and it was egregious because they didn't get what they could have got from other teams. But like I told you when it happened, he wanted to ensure Hopkins wouldn't be in the AFC, and he did that. He's in the NFC West. They're in the AFC South. We only have to play him one time the next 4 or 5 seasons, if that. So it does make sense from that standpoint. We got to move on to the NFC East. New York Giants, very interesting. I mean, they had money, and damn, did they spend it. They tagged Leonard Williams. They tagged Leonard Williams. That's all I have to say about that. Eric Tomlinson, tight end. Levine Toyolo, tight end. They want some bigger blocking tight ends. David Mayo, a reserve linebacker. Blake Martinez, 3 or 30 million. Led the NFL in tackles last year, I believe, from the Green Bay Packers. He only tackles them. Dion Lewis, again, just one of those moves where you're like, what? Why? Cam Fleming, borderline starter as a tackle. Kyle Fackrell, an older but still effective edge linebacker. And then James Bradbury, a cornerback from Carolina, who's very good. I think that was their best signing. And then, of course, special teams captain, probably he'll be captain for that, Nate Ebner. Technically, he's a defensive back, but he's a special teams guy who will fill in on defense if necessary. So a lot of these moves point more towards building a organization and building leadership and a locker room, more so than talent alone. What do you think about what the Giants were able to do in free agency?
Well, I know a lot of Giant fans are excited because they see Tom Coughlin and Joe Judge, but here's the problem with it. And Joe Judge, I think, was a good hire. I think he could definitely command a room. He's going to try to build the Giant culture. He's going to build it differently than in New England. He knows that he cannot build it exactly the same. It's not going to work that way. But I think Dave Gettleman's still making the decisions. And I think, John Mara, was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It's like, okay, I know we need to move on. I know we need a new head coach, but it's like, all right, I'm still going to let, Dave Gettleman should have been out the door. I mean, Dave, just because he drafted Daniel Jones, Daniel Jones, like, he could have, there was 6 free agents that were just as good, or you could get to play just as good as Daniel Jones. So I think, the fan base and the media were kind of saying, okay, Gettleman's drafted well. He's drafted well. So let's, they were okay with keeping him. But I think, Gettleman, once again, people are talking around the league that Gettleman's just signing his guys. He's signing James Bradbury. And then, at linebacker, they just signed 2 guys, Patrick Graham coached in Green Bay. So it's just like, okay, this coach wants that guy, this coach wants that, Gettleman wants his guy. So they're just kind of just signing guys. They're just filling positions. And with the Giants, their direction, they're going to have to build this culture up. And before we talk about how can they improve, because clearly right now they're a 4 or 5 win roster. They're not a very good team. So it's Judge getting in there and making sure that he has the say in how he wants his team to be built, not Gettleman, because it's Judge's team. Gettleman's not going to be there for much longer. And I think John Mara needs to realize, and maybe he will realize as they're working through this draft, that hey, you know what? Maybe I should have got rid of Gettleman too.
And I'll admit, I mean, I saw plays that Daniel Jones made that shocked me last year. I mean, he definitely has something that makes sense as to why he can be a successful quarterback. He makes touch throws that go, whoa, whoa. Like he made some serious passes last year that shocked me. But at the same time, every single time I saw the Giants on red zone, it felt like they were giving up a 40-yard touchdown. Their defense was not disciplined. They gave up big plays all year long. They gave up just some bad drives, some ugly football, especially versus the Panthers and Kyle Allen. They got crushed at home in a rain game. I mean, there were some games that just didn't add, or not the Panthers. I'm sorry, the Arizona Cardinals. Kyle Murray and Chase Edmonds, the former Fordham guy, just ripped them apart that game, and it just didn't. I think more of these moves spoke culture than talent. And that's understandable. You need culture, you need discipline. And obviously, the Giants will be much more disciplined across the board. It's just a question of how many wins will they have? 6, 7 at most. I mean, they could end up competing for the first overall pick. Who knows? Dallas Cowboys had arguably the toughest free agency to have to go through, as they had Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper. They had to deal with which one they didn't tag, which one they didn't sign. In my opinion, they made the wrong decision. They gave Amari Cooper a 5-year, $100 million deal, $60 million guaranteed, $40 million guaranteed at signing, $20 million guaranteed for injury if he's like so injured in 2022. Nevertheless, Amari Cooper, safety, HaHa Clinton Dix, they got in an absurd low deal, 1 year, $4 million. Anthony Brown, cornerback, they brought back 3 years, 15.5. Kai Forbath will be the kicker moving forward, although they also signed Greg Zerlin, so there's going to be a kicker battle. I don't know. It's weird. They signed both kickers with guaranteed money. I've never seen that in my life before. Blake Jarwin, tight end, reserve, backup tight end, starter. Who knows? They've had tight end issues for years. Sean Lee, they're bringing back. I love Sean Lee. I'm a Penn Stater, but he can't do much at his age and injury history. Joe Looney will probably be starting at this point after who retired for them?
Frederick.
Yeah, after Travis Frederick retired, Zach Martin had blood clot scares last year. Joe Looney will probably start for them at this point, if not McGovern from Penn State. Gerald McCoy, defensive tackle, 3 years, $18.3 million. That was the key for me. I think that really put their defensive line a little better compared to what they had last year. Zentari Poe, another defensive tackle. They want to upgrade their defensive line so DeMarcus Lawrence can affect the quarterback. Obviously, since they couldn't tag two guys, they had to tag Dak Prescott. That's going to be an issue moving forward. Will he hold out? He might. And that's going to become a major issue moving forward. Aldon Smith was the one signing that came out of even further than left field. That came out of Mars. The guy hasn't played since 2015. He's had drug issues. He's had issues. I mean, just issues. Mental health issues, all sorts of issues, some criminal issues. Former very talented rookie year with the 49ers. Aldon Smith, 1 year, $2 million, up to $4 million with incentives. Again, that is a Dallas Cowboys signing. They sign guys with issues off the field just to see if it'll work out and it'll play out to be a great contract. Whatever. I'm not a fan of adding guys with bad character, but they are. Darian Thompson, safety, that rounds out the Cowboys. So obviously they had some huge decisions to make. Dak, Cooper, what are you going to do? I think they messed up. I would always give quarterback the money, tag the wide receiver, deal with that later on, especially because they're going to have a lot of money open on the books next year due to Frederick's retirement. It confuses me. I don't understand it. Dak's probably going to hold out, and we don't know what will happen with the Cowboys we do. The Cowboys will not be good without Dak. They might lose games, and it could hurt them winning a playoffs or getting to the playoffs if Dak is not starting and he holds out. So what do you think about what the Cowboys did?
I think they really screwed up. I mean, you look at Amari Cooper, paying him $20 million a year. Who is going to pay Amari Cooper $20 million a year? Nobody. He didn't even have
Redskins,
much of a
maybe?
market.
That's it. The Redskins
I
were the
mean,
only team.
yeah, it's just what are you doing? And once again, on defense, you lose Robert Quinn, who was a great pass rusher for you last year.
Out
And
of nowhere, by the way.
yeah, and then you lose Byron Jones, your best cover corner. And at safety, haha, Clinton Dix, like one of the worst tackling safeties in the league. This is another guy that he's still living off his reputation. He is not a very good player. And he's one of those guys like a Clowney, like he's just living off that pedigree, but he's just, the league is telling you that no one wants to pay him. The league, they watch the tape, they realize, like, okay, these players aren't very good. So I don't like what Dallas did. I mean, I don't know about Mike McCarthy. I mean, anyone's better than the Clapper, Jason Garrett. So I don't know. I mean, Dallas, it's just really the Eagles are going to get stronger in the draft, and I think they're probably going to easily win the division.
Speaking of those Eagles, as I pull up their sheet, why can't I find? Okay, here we go. Philadelphia Eagles. Speaking of the Eagles in that division, who I think we both think they're the leader to win the NFC
Yeah,
East
no
next
doubt.
year. Yeah, I mean, I think I like what they did personally. Jatavis Brown, a fantastic linebacker. I mean, in my opinion, he's a very good inside linebacker. Javon Hargrave, arguably the sneakiest signing in free agency. He just played absolute lights out for the Steelers last year. He's going to stay in the state 3 years, $39 million, $26 million guaranteed. He's a true nose tackle. Rodney McLeod, safety, 2 year, $12 million. They needed defensive back help. They also added two more safeties. They kept Jalen Mills, who has played both defensive back safeties, done a little bit of everything. And then Will Parks coming from Denver, I believe. They also added cornerbacks Nicole Roby Coleman and quarterback Nate Sudfeld. And then, of course, in a trade with the Detroit Lions for a third-round pick and the fifth-round pick, they acquired Darius Slay, one of the best. He's one of the best on-ball cornerbacks. He has a ton of interceptions, makes big plays. He's a good leader, from my understanding. No one's had an issue with him, other than apparently Matt Patricia. So you see what the Eagles did. They still may trade for Yannick Ngakoue at some point. They are one of the leaders to trade for Yannick Ngakoue. But let's pretend that, obviously, well, it hasn't happened, so we don't have to pretend. But the Eagles, again, they were a very good team last year, but they had issues at wide receiver and had issues in the secondary. They addressed one of those, being the secondary. We expect them to address the wide receivers and the running backs in the draft. But what do you think about the free agency from our clubhouse leader for the division NFC East?
A plus, really. I mean, you add Javon Hargrave, who is so much better than Tim Jernigan and Malik Jackson, who they've run out next to Fletcher Cox over the last few years. And that you make a good point about Ngakoue. He would add so much to this pass rush where, Brandon Graham's getting a little older. He's still good. Derek Barnett hasn't really panned out so far, but he would add so much to this defense. And Darius Slay was a steal for a third-round pick. I mean, honestly, if I were a team and I had a late first-round pick, I'd give up a first for Darius Slay. Like, that's how good Darius Slay is. I mean, he still played great in Detroit.
He's a little older.
He is older, but he can still play at a high level. He's easily one of the top 10 corners in the league, in my opinion. There's no doubt about that. And I think the only question, obviously, we have is at receiver. But, I mean, there's no doubt. I think the Eagles might double dip at receiver, honestly, because
good triple.
Jeffrey's the guy they just cannot get rid of because of his contract, and he's got no juice anymore. And Deshaun Jackson at 33, he kind of reminds me of Ted Ginn. He's like that middle 30s guy that could still run a little bit, but, he's really more like a fourth receiver now. So, but they still have the great two tight ends. And, I definitely see them drafted a receiver in the first round. Maybe they'll go close to home, KJ Hamler, who knows? But they're going to get a speed receiver. And I think this offense is going to return to 2017.
All right, we're going to try to pick up the pace here a little bit. That's both of our faults, obviously. We're having fun with this, but we do want to keep this under a certain time. We're going to do a mock draft show separately because we went a little longer than we expected. But let's move on to the Washington Redskins. They traded for Kyle Allen as a backup quarterback. Fifth-round pick, surprisingly high, but he has value. He's proven he can play. And if they need a backup to play, he has proven he can, in fact, play. Peyton Barber, running back. Ronald Darby, the cornerback, that was one of their bigger signings. Sean Davis, safety. Thomas Davis, linebacker. Kendall Fuller, 4-year, $40 million. That was their biggest signing from the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl winning Chiefs. Big deal for them. Cody Latimer, they went hard after Amari Cooper. They did not get him. So they got Cody Latimer instead. Much worse. J.D. McKissick, who never really got a fair shot in Seattle, in my opinion, very valuable running back. Kevin Pierre-Lewis, reserve linebacker. Brendan Sheriff got the franchise tag, and Wes Schweitzer will back up. Actually, he's going to start at center. 3 years, $13.5 million. Anything you like or dislike from the Redskins specifically?
Well, first of all, the Ron Rivera hire was a home run hire, and
We
he's
both
gonna
agree
build
with
that
that.
culture.
Yes.
Oh yeah, he's going to build that culture to where it needs to be. I mean, everyone loved being a Carolina Panther in his tenure there, so he's going to do a great job, I think, in Washington. They have some young talent on defense already. I think Darby was one of the best value signings there was because he could be a number one corner. He just hasn't proven it. He hasn't stayed healthy over the years. Kendall Fuller was a great move, very underrated guy, great nickel corner, but he also played free safety last year, and he was a great complement to Tyrann Mathieu, especially in Steve Spagnuolo's pressure defense. I just like the Washington Redskins direction right now. Free agency, they mostly made small moves, and it really shows that Ron Rivera couldn't even resolve the Trent Williams disaster. They'll probably have to wind up releasing him, which is really, really sad, honestly, that they couldn't come to an agreement. But they have some young pieces. It's going to take them time, but they finally, maybe 10 years too late, they finally fired Bruce Allen, which is something they needed to do. He oh my God, it's just terrible in Washington. Dan Snyder just let him do whatever he wanted. He ran the team to the ground. One of the worst cultures in the league, a toxic environment, kind of like Jacksonville over the last few years. So, a clean slate with Ron Rivera, and everything's kind of looking up for the Redskins. But, quarterback's a big question because of the Haskins immaturity last year. They like Allen, so we'll see. I don't think they'll draft one in the first round, but, I think they'll just kind of wait and see over the next year or two.
Moving on to the NFC North, the Minnesota Vikings didn't do much. Their biggest signing was Michael Pierce, defensive tackle. 3 years, $28 million, $18 million guaranteed. A lot of re-signings for the Minnesota Vikings. Amir Abdullah, the running back. They're going to bring back Dan Bailey, 1-year deal. He's made a bit of a comeback in his career, and they needed him. CJ Ham, major money for a fullback, 4-year, $12.125 million. Anthony Harris is coming back on the franchise tag. Rashad Hill, former extra tackle for the Saints, is coming to the Vikings. Sean Mannion re-signed with the Vikings. Tajay Sharp, 1-year deal, $1.5 million from Tennessee, wide receiver. He kind of replaces Stephon Diggs theoretically. And then Eric Wilson, a very athletic linebacker. They put a second-round tender on him. He'll be returning to the Minnesota Vikings. So mostly re-signings for the Vikings. Not much to say here.
Yeah, real quick, they let a lot of guys go. They're going to completely rebuild the secondary. I mean, Zimmer realizes they have to get younger there, and he's one of the best defensive minds in the league. So I have confidence in him. And yeah, they still have a window. They gave Cousins a pseudo extension. So, they're going to try to win now, and we'll see. It's going to be a more competitive North, though, this year.
Green Bay Packers spent a lot of money last year, which meant this year they weren't going to do much at all, which is exactly what happened. Christian Kirksey, some consider him overrated, some consider him underrated. Really depends who you ask. The former Browns linebacker, 2 years, $16 million with the Packers. Devin Funchess, in my opinion, just a fantastic signing by the Green Bay Packers if he can stay healthy. 1 year, $2.5 million. There's $3.75 million in incentives. So that proves they want him to have a big year. Mercedes Lewis resigns, 1-year deal. He had a tiny good connection with Aaron Rodgers, but he's older. And then Rick Wagner's the key signing, agrees to terms with the Packers. For some reason, this website doesn't have the numbers on that right now. Maybe they haven't came out yet, but that he replaces Brian Blaga. So really, they just tidied up a few positions.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have much to do. They definitely need a target receiver in the draft for sure because Rodgers needs more weapons. Obviously, there's no tight ends available, so they can't upgrade there. Yeah, they're just a team that hey, they made it far last year to the championship game. They're trying to see how they could push to win a Super Bowl in Rodgers' last few years.
Detroit Lions, they did some things. Geronimo Allison, former Packer, 1-year deal, wide receiver. Jamie Collins, former Patriot. That's the theme here. 3 years, $30 million. That's a lot of money for an older inside linebacker. Chase Daniel, he's going to be the backup quarterback, and that's why the Chiefs had to get a quarterback. Duron Harmon got him in a trade with the Patriots for a seventh round pick. I'm sorry, a 2027 and 2025th round pick. They have a lot of picks to begin with. Jaron Kerr, safety, Miles Kelber, safety. Reggie Ragland, another linebacker from the Chiefs, actually. So interesting deal. He's another inside, but he can also play outside linebacker, a little bit versatile, but he can't guard a tight end or anything. Former Jets cornerback Daryl Roberts, he's awful, so I don't like that signing at all. One of the league's most penalized cornerbacks. Danny Shelton, defensive lineman, sneaky good deal from them. Desmond Trufant, an older cornerback, 2 years, $21 million. Halpula via Vitae, however you want to say it. Vitae. I mean,
That was a good attempt.
5-year, $50 million. Arguably, not arguably, it was the most absurd signing in free agency. It blew everyone's mind. It's not that good. It's that simple. He's just not that good. And then defensive tackle Nick Williams. I quickly, before I give you a chance to speak here, just want to emphasize how poor that Vitae signing is going to look in 2 years. They're paying a guy, starting tackle. I expect to give up less than 2 sacks this season type money, and that is just not what they're getting with big Vitae there. And to me, it's a waste of money. They had cap space. They could have given more money 3 years with Jack Conklin. Instead, they go with Vitae, give him absurd amounts of money. I think that was the most ridiculous free agent signing in this year's period.
Yeah, well, whoever stood on the table for Vitae must really have some pull. It must have been Bob Quinn, I guess, the GM. Wow. And it's interesting too because like the Packers, they went from Dulaga to Wagner, they downgraded, and then the Lions went from Wagner to Vitae, which is another downgrade. So very strange. But Patricia is saying that hey, I'm just going to bring in more and more Patriots, and hopefully the rest of my players buy in to my culture. I'm not really sure that's the way to do it. He needs to build a unique culture that fits the Detroit Lions, and he hasn't done that yet. But one thing is for sure, their defense is going to be very improved. Desmond Trufant was a great move. Harmon was a great move. Collins adds some athleticism at linebacker. Shelton's going to eat up some double teams at nose tackle. I actually really like this Lions team. I think they can compete for a playoff spot as long as Matt Stafford stays healthy. So yeah, I think the Lions are going to be much improved this year.
Chicago Bears moving on. Last team in the NFC North. Artie Burns, 1-year deal, former first-round pick by the Steelers, cornerback. Deion Bush, safety, reserve safety. Nick Foles acquired in a trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars in exchange for a fourth-round pick. They restructured the deal, paying him $8 million per year over the next $3 million, $6 million in incentives per year. But Foles can void the deal in 2021 and 2022 based on performance. Jimmy Graham, an absurd 2-year, $16 million deal. Jermaine Irfetti, I like this signing, 1-year deal with the Bears. Very good interior offensive lineman, athletic. He's not going to wow you with his physicality, but he is athletic and can get up the field. Robert Quinn, who many thought was ending his career in Miami, ended up going to the Cowboys last year in a trade. Played very good for them. 5 years, $70 million, includes $30 million guaranteed. It felt extremely unnecessary by the Bears to do that. And then they re-signed an older inside linebacker, Danny Trevathan, 3-year, $21.75 million, includes $14 million guaranteed. I don't like what the Bears did at all, if we're being completely honest. I don't understand why you're bringing in Foles and paying him that much. You're paying Jimmy Graham way too much. He has no trade clause for 2 years for a guy that can't stay on the field. I like Ifedi. I mentioned that, but you have way too much money to Quinn, even though he had a great year last year. You have Khalil Mack. I don't know why you're spending that money on that position. And then you're overpaying an older inside linebacker. Yes, I know you want some consistency, but is that really the move? You could have got a younger inside linebacker for the same price. So I give it an F. I don't like it at all.
Yeah, one thing's for sure is that Matt Nagy finally has a say in who his quarterback is going to be. There is no chance that he was going to go into this year with Mitch Trubisky, Ryan Pace's poster boy here. It's a miracle that he still has a job as well. But yeah, Foles is Nagy's guy. Nagy's tough. He was banging on the table for him, I'm sure. He helped convince with Andy Reid for Foles to keep playing football back in Kansas City 5 or 6 years ago. So, but here's the thing: it just smells to me that like they're still with Trubisky. Like they're gonna bring in Foles, but Foles is a really nice guy. He's not gonna step on Trubisky. He's gonna compete. But I think Trubisky is going to start week one because that's Pace's guy, and it's confirmation bias. It's he's going to listen to anyone that will tell him that Trubisky can play, that he has potential. Defensive, I actually do love the Robert Quinn signing just because of what it does from a football standpoint. It gives another pass rusher opposite Khalil Mack. He's much better than Leonard Floyd as a pass rusher, and if Akeem Hicks could stay healthy this year, I think that defense could be kind of scary. But yeah, the Bears are in a tough place because they just kind of made a half measured move to upgrade a quarterback, and it just seems like that Nagy and Pace are going to be out the door after this year.
All right, we got 18 minutes for these last two divisions. Arizona Cardinals starting off the NFC West. Devondre Campbell, linebacker, 1 year deal, very good. I think it works out for both the player and the team there. Kenyon Drake got the transition tag, and then he signed the tag 14 days later. He played very well for them after a trade for Miami. Larry Fitzgerald coming back 1 year, $11 million. Marcus Gilbert, former Steelers offensive tackle, and he played for the Cardinals last year, coming back on a 1 year deal. Devin Kennard, linebacker from the Lions, sneaky good deal for the Arizona Cardinals, 3 year, $20 million. Jordan Phillips from the Bills, 3 year deal. And then obviously they got DeAndre Hopkins in that trade with the Texans. For me, A plus all across the board.
Yeah, there's an adjustment for Cliff Kingsbury, obviously coming from college. He's actually realized that you kind of need a tight end or two to play in the NFL. You can't just line up in a 2x2 four receiver set. DeAndre Hopkins should do wonders for Murray, a guy who his game is predicated on extending plays. So he should be able to find Hopkins down the field, kind of like how Watson did. So he's really a perfect fit stylistically for Kingsbury's offense. And defensively, they got better. Campbell's a very athletic linebacker to go with Hicks, who's very athletic. Jordan Phillips, very underrated D tackle. So they're making some moves. They could get another pass rusher opposite Chandler Jones. His defense could really play, and they could make some noise in the West.
Yeah, watch for them to get a pass rusher in third round of the NFL draft. That's why I think it looks like almost a guarantee for them. Los Angeles Rams had very little money to spend. They're trying to trade Brandon Cooks. They released Todd Gurley. He went to the Falcons, which we'll get into almost last. LA Rams, Austin Blythe, 1 year deal. Michael Brockers, defensive tackle. After he almost went to the Ravens, ended up coming back to the LA Rams. Leonard Floyd from the Chicago Bears, again, a guy that was successful as a rookie, didn't do much since. 1 year, $10 million. Ashawn Robinson, former first-round pick by the Lions, defensive tackle. And then Andrew Whitworth, they re-signed. So really, like many other teams, just tidying up a few positions.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about the Rams. I'll try to do it quickly. So, coaching wise, they added really two young upcoming guys: Kevin O'Connell on offense, Brandon Staley on defense. Two guys that are kind of like McVay, energetic young guys. Staley is going to build this defense like a Fangio defense. Obviously, they signed Leonard Floyd, so that kind of gives you that impression. They added Ashawn Robinson, a good nose tackle. But, Jalen Ramsey's still there. They're paying him a lot of money. He's an elite corner. So maybe they're going to go in a different direction because a Fangio defense doesn't really need great corners. So hopefully he tailors that defense to the players they have there. And offensively, I think they did a great job bringing Whitworth back and Blythe, two guys that played. Blythe could really play three positions for them. But yeah, I mean, they're kind of cap strapped. They really made a lot of bad moves. Les Snead, another guy, what is he doing? If I were them, first of all, I wanted to, like Mike Lombardi says, one of my guys, he says they should have just paid Sean McVay $25 million instead of paying Jared Goff. Because yeah, horrible GM. Les Snead's made so many mistakes. He's run this team to the ground. Let McVay run the team, honestly. McVay should run everything. But, the Rams, it's going to be hard for them to get better this year. They have a big hole at running back now, which is so important in their offense. So I don't know with the Rams. They kind of just have to take their lumps maybe this year to get back and get some cap health.
49ers re-signed Jimmy Ward. They really liked him. 3 years, $28.5 million. They wanted to keep him. Re-signed center Ben Garland, 1 year, $2.25 million. 1 year deal for wide receiver Travis Benjamin, up to $2 million. And then they had to choose whether or not to keep Armstead or Buckner. They kept Armstead, traded Buckner to the Colts like we talked about earlier. Armstead got 5 years, $85 million, $48.5 million guaranteed. Not much to say here other than they did what they had to do.
Yeah, and that trade for Buckner is huge for them because it gives them the 13th overall pick, where they could possibly get a Jerry Jeudy, who would be
Yes,
that true X receiver like Julio Jones was for Shanahan in Atlanta. That would
exactly.
be huge for them. I don't know with Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know if he's going to be their long term guy. I still think if it doesn't work out, that he's going to go after Cousins, who was his guy in a year or two. So yeah, the 49ers, great team. They're going to try to get George Kittle signed, which is going to be tough because he's probably going to want top receiver money. So yeah, they kind of just have to work on keeping this core together because they really assembled some core players on both sides of the ball.
Seattle Seahawks are always one of the most perplexing teams when it comes to the offseason, always doing wild stuff in the draft, doing confusing stuff in the free agency. They brought in Jaron Reed. They re-signed him, Jerron, defensive tackle, one of the better defensive tackles in the league, 2-year, $23 million. Greg Olsen, they oddly brought in on a 1-year, $7 million deal. Okay. Cedric Abuhe, tackle, 1-year deal with the Seahawks. Bruce Irvin is expected to resign with the Seahawks. He hasn't officially yet. Jacob Hollister got a tender. He'll be coming back. BJ Feeney, the offensive lineman, will be coming back 2 years, $8 million. Oh, I'm sorry, he's signing with the Seahawks, 2 years, $8 million. Harold, he's expected to replace Jermaine Ifedi. Quentin Dunbar, former Redskin, got traded to the Seahawks for a fifth-round pick. The Redskins basically recouped a fifth-round pick for trading their fifth-round pick for Kyle Allen. And then their biggest signing, or I guess sexiest, was Philip Dorsett, 1-year, $1 million deal. Again, tidying up positions. They know what they have. They know who they have in a quarterback. Comes more so down to the draft.
Yeah, actually, probably their most underrated move was traded for Quentin Dunbar for basically nothing. He's a big physical corner, very underrated. He'll fit great in Seattle's press cover three scheme. The only thing they really need is a big time pass rusher, so look for that in the draft for sure.
They could still re-sign Jadeveon Clowney. Nobody really knows what's going on.
Or Everson Griffin's out there too.
Clowney and Ngakoue are kind of at a halt right now. A few of the veteran free agents are waiting because they'd rather spend their time with their family right now during a pandemic than focusing on their free agency, whether it be Everson Griffin, Damon Harrison, he just had a kid, a few other key veterans that will be signed at some point over the next few months. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tom Brady, Tom Brady, Tom Brady, Tom Brady, Tom Brady. They also got they re-signed Ndamukong Suh. They tagged Shaq Barrett, who had one of the best, if not the best, pass rushing season last year in the NFL. Blaine Gabbert coming back. He'll back up Tom Brady. Jameis Winston is out. Joel Haden, 1-year, $2.3 million, offensive lineman. Kevin Minter, a reserve / starting linebacker. Jason Pierre-Paul comes back, 2-year, $27 million. And then cornerback Ryan Smith re-signed with the team. Tom Brady.
Yeah, we'll see how he fits in. Obviously, he's going to want to put his influence on the offense. Not exactly, they're not a stylistically, they're not a match. He's not really a match with Bruce Arians, but he does have plenty of arm strength still. His arm really hasn't declined that much. So I think he's going to be able to, run those shot play action plays that Bruce Arians loves so much. It's going to be a little different from Winston, and they're going to have to work together, and it's going to be an adjustment for Tom because he doesn't have the time to build that chemistry with these receivers and his teammates right now. He can only do that virtually. Just real quick, Todd Bowles did a great job with the defense last year. Very young defense last year. They made some re-signings, and they're only going to get better. So I like Tampa Bay's direction right now.
And I mean, I'm just happy as a Jets fan he's no longer in the AFC East. I started getting really nervous with those Miami rumors, and I just couldn't do it anymore. The Jets don't have to play Tampa Bay until next year, and there's no guarantee Brady will be on the Bucs next 2021 season. So for me, it doesn't matter anymore. It's done. So it was actually one of the best days of my life. New Orleans Saints, Drew Brees back on a 2-year, $50 million deal. Taysom Hill also came back, first round tender, which means he's getting paid around $4 million, which is a lot of money for a backup quarterback who signed a tender. Malcolm Jenkins is returning to the Saints after being drafted from the Saints then moved on to the Eagles. Now he's going back to the Saints. 4-year, $32 million. They felt he was better than Von Bell. And they also brought in DJ Swearinger, the safety. PJ Williams, cornerback, they re-signed. Andrews Pete, they re-signed, 5-year deal. David Onyemata, they re-signed. And then that's it. So mostly just tidying up guys besides Malcolm Jenkins and, also Emmanuel Sanders. So mostly tidying up things. But I think if you take away Drew Brees' worst performance in the last 4 seasons in the playoff game they lost,
Yep.
they were maybe a Super Bowl winning team. So again, it all comes down to Drew Brees, just like for the Bucs, it all comes down to Tom Brady, and the Steelers, it all comes down to Big Ben. Am I wrong?
Yeah, and Emmanuel Sanders is a big upgrade over Ted Ginn and Traquan Smith, so that was big. It was curious that they gave Pete all that money. It's just because of how important guards and centers are for Drew Brees, who has made a career really, especially at the back nine of his career, of stepping up in the pocket and using subtle movement to manipulate defenders and coverage. Drew Brees could definitely still play. Him and Peyton are a perfect marriage. And again, like you said, I mean, it's just they got to get over the hump of the playoffs. They've had a Super Bowl caliber roster for the last 3 years. They just need to get over it. Just plain and simple.
Carolina Panthers, new head coach, new offensive coordinator. And, most people don't say new head coach, new offensive coordinator, but we do now with this team because they brought in head coach Matt Rule from Baylor, former Temple head coach, just done incredible things at the college level. And then he goes and steals arguably the most wanted offensive coordinator in all of football, Joe Brady, a young hotshot, former Penn State coach who coached Joe Burrow and won a national championship for LSU, and head coach Ed Orgeron. So clearly everything is changing in Carolina. They're building a new practice facility, multi-million-dollar. They're adding a major sports science program at the request, $200 million at the request of new head coach Matt Rule and billion-dollar owner David Tepper. So let's go over their signings. Former Jet wide receiver and former Temple wide receiver for Matt Rule, Robbie Anderson, 2-year, $20 million, $12 million in year one. Trey Boston resigns with the Panthers. He was a safety that was a free agent in August last year, and now he gets a nice extension with the Panthers. Teddy Bridgewater, obviously the new quarterback after they released Cam Newton, 3 years, $63 million, $33 million guaranteed. They brought in PJ Walker, the best XFL quarterback, or at least the flashiest one, to be his backup. They clearly have a vision of what they want in a quarterback there. Seth DeValve, tight end, Pharaoh Cooper, wide receiver. John Miller, former Chicago guard. Russell Okung, they acquired in a trade. Seth Roberts, wide receiver. Stephen Weatherly, defensive end. And Tahir Whitehead, former Raiders linebacker.
Yeah, so the Brady offense is really the Saints offense. Getting people the ball in space, letting them run after the catch. He needs weapons for this offense, and he has a ton of them. McCaffrey, Samuel, Anderson, more. Maybe they'll get some more in the draft too. But yeah, they're building from the bottom here. But I mean, Joe Brady was an outstanding hire. I don't know, it's just Rule. I mean, Rule can convince anybody to come with them, and it was a great hire. The owner's all in, and we'll see where Rule could take them.
Who's the last team we got to do here?
Atlanta. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Couldn't think of that last team. All right, here we go. Atlanta Falcons. Where are they? There we go. They did not do much, but they did get Dante Fowler Jr. replacing Vic Beasley Jr. Yeah, that sounds weird to say. 3-year, $48 million. Obviously, that's like a major need for them. They've had issues pass rushing the last 2 years since they were in the Super Bowl. Todd Gurley, 1 year, $6 million. He signed his deal, has not passed the physical. They say they have no worry about it. He will pass his physical. Hayden Hurst, they acquired in a trade with low-key your favorite team, the Ravens, along with the 2020 fourth-round pick in exchange for a 2022 fifth-round selections. Very interesting trade. I love it. And then Tyler Davison, the defensive tackle. Overall, I think the Falcons got rid of guys they felt they needed to get rid of, added guys they felt they needed to add. They need a big draft to be able to compete for the playoffs. That's the only way they're making the playoffs.
Yeah, I like the Fowler move. They just couldn't rush the passer. And if you're going to run that Seahawks 49ers style defense, you're going to need pass rushers. So they finally got one there. It's just the 49ers, the Falcons just kind of been stuck in neutral over the last few years. They just can't get back to that playoff season in 2016. And, they're just trying to recreate that success. Dan Quinn and Dimitrov are still there. On offense, they have weapons. It's just they can never stay healthy. And defensively, it's been a disaster. So look for them to really go heavy, especially at corner in the draft.
Yeah, and that wraps up our free agent recap for the NFL draft and for expandtheboxscore.com. Uh, I'm Matt Lownes with Kyle Suta, obviously, and we will be doing this for the next month. Throughout this month. Today we thought we were going to go into a mock draft, but we ran way over time.
Yeah, way over.
And so we'll be doing a mock draft next. Then we'll be going over specific prospects, offense, defense, some steals, some overrated, underrated, and then maybe even getting into some undrafted free agents. And then we're hoping to do a draft recap as well. So follow us along for the next month. We'll be doing some great stuff for Expand the Box Score. Kyle, any last thoughts on free agency?
No, I guess we'll do this next week.
Yeah, man. And stay here. Stay here with us all month. Have any questions? Tweet at expandtheboxscore.com, and we will make sure to get them in future videos. Thank you, and I hope everyone listening has a great day.